I want to thank the member for Goldstein for bringing this motion for debate. I know you're very thoughtful and genuine in your concerns regarding media diversity and regulation, your motivations here. For those watching at home, I say the words debate because private members' motions don't get voted on, so thank you for the emails and calls. We can hold the calls, but they are an important way to bring issues for debate. Now, the health and diversity of Australia's media sector is critically important, as has been said, for our democracy and society. And I'll quote from the Senate report, which aptly stated, I quote, "Public interest journalism is essential to a democracy. Active citizenship requires access to reliable information, and democracy cannot flourish without a diversity of media sources and a regulatory regime that protects consumers against the spread of misinformation. The concentration of media ownership is inherently corrosive of democratic practice because it places control over the sources of information and opinion in far too few hands." And the problems in Australia are real and have been steadily growing under the previous government. And the motion summarises these well. I'll just highlight a few aspects. 255 media outlets across Australia closed down over the 3 years prior to March this year. 255. 112 local print newspapers have shut down after ownership of APM was transferred. And one company in Australia, now let's not be coy, it's Uncle Rupert's News Limited, has a 59% share of the metropolitan and national print media market by readership, 59%. And the second has 23%. So what that means is the majority of our nation's newspapers are controlled by one company headed by a US citizen. The Senate report outlines deeply concerning examples of editorial coordination and bias. And by global standards, I was shocked to read this in the motion. The Columbia University study, which you cited, indicates that only Egypt and China have a greater concentration of newspaper ownership of the countries studied. So the question then in front of us as a parliament, and certainly for the government, is what to do. Now, the Senate report, which was in response to Kevin Rudd's petition signed by over 500,000 Australians, the largest petition the parliament's ever received, which certainly demonstrates a degree of community concern. The Senate report and this motion called for a judicial inquiry to investigate the state of media diversity in Australia. Now, I'll just state my view on the notion of a judicial inquiry. It should be uncontroversial to accept that in the future, at whatever time a major inquiry into media diversity is called, that it makes sense that it be at arm's length from politicians. The vested interests are too powerful and the incentives are all wrong for politicians to undertake such a task. At that time, then an independent examination of media diversity would seem to be an appropriate course of action. There's different forms. You've put one forward, the Senate report puts another forward. No doubt there's others. But I also accept that for now, the government is right to focus on practical actions. Frankly, we've had a decade of inaction by the previous government, actually worse than that, Deputy Speaker. The few things that they actually did do in this space made the matter worse. Labor opposed the former government's repeal of the 2 out of 3 cross-media rules in 2017, which has led to more concentration. And we fought at every step the Liberals' plans to boot community TV off the air, so important to give voice to local communities. Labor also opposed the Liberals' cuts to the ABC's budget. The former Prime Minister used a funny little trick when he got sick of that. He added about $1 so that he thought we couldn't say it's a cut. Well, it was a cut in real terms, and everyone knows that. And the government, I'm very pleased, will introduce 5-year funding terms for the national broadcasters. So right now, though, the government is focused on acting to support the long-term viability and diversity of the sector and implementing a backlog of recommendations. There is a backlog from previous inquiries and taking concrete action. There's just things that the previous government just didn't do. $29 million we're doing into local news and broadcasting transition package, the News Media Assistance Program, the review of broadcasting services determination, the review of the anti-siphoning rules, so important to ensure working families can watch for free events of national and cultural significance. And we'll be legislating a prominence framework to ensure Australian TV can easily be found on smart TVs. Importantly, the responses to media concentration and reform will be principles-based, evidence-informed and consultative. Old-fashioned, I know, nerdy, public policy based on evidence. Now, the Minister's committed to developing a meaningful framework to measure diversity, which is long overdue. We need to actually have an agreed measure, which should have been done a long time ago. Now, I'm healthily sceptical, let's say, that these actions will prove sufficient in the long run, but they're absolutely the right focus for now. And I also acknowledge that the regulatory framework, the point you made, has to be updated to take account of the internet providers and the fact that we live in a digital age, which the current regulatory framework doesn't do. So right now we're getting on with action. But I really thank you for bringing an important debate, and I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear of these matters from you, Member for Goldstein. Thank you.
The question is that the motion